are really lucky to have our dear friend Christina Haxton, who is the CEO and founder of the Center for Sustainable Strategies.
Very good. Very good.
Or otherwise, I think it's CSS.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sexy and fun.
I think it's CFSS.
Well, CFSS.
Yeah, Syphis.
Yeah, sassafras.
Sassafras?
I think you should say sassafras. No vowels. So welcome, Christina. Thank you for being on Trailblazers.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I can't wait. It sounds such a fun interview to have. So, and you guys are awesome. So
that's right. If we're not laughing, we're not doing our job. So we'll start it off right out of the gate. Christina, can you give us a little bit about a background about yourself, about CFSS or the Center for Sustainable Strategies, and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. Let's see. So the Center for Sustainable Strategies is a boutique consultancy, combination of a business coaching and executive coaching and leadership development to support the executives and the leaders in the organization to execute strategy. Mm-hmm. And the company was formed in 18 years ago. Wow. And before that, I say I'm a recovering marriage and family therapist, and I had a specialization in working with initially burnout CEOs who wanted to start their own company, which, as you may or may not know, is not always such a smooth transition.
I don't know what you're talking about. Not even at all.
I figured you have no clue and have never seen that before. So, so that's how it originated. I made the natural transition from being a marriage and family therapist and specifically working with family-owned businesses, which can be a huge cluster in and of itself for a lot of obvious or maybe not so obvious reasons. So I really focused my professional career in that area, and then made the natural transition to really helping small to mid-sized enterprises, not necessarily family owned, but I'd say probably maybe about a third of my clients are family owned businesses, help them scale. And to help basically bottom line people problems from being profit problems, because that's where the pain was, right, for my clients. And I really couldn't help but notice that a lot of the people problems were because people are people and they show up at work the way they show up at work. And we can't differentiate between, the human at home and the human at work, right? And we are, it's complicated, right? We're part of a system. Relationship systems are relationship systems. And those rules of engagement tend to repeat themselves no matter if we're at home or we're at work. And so really helping business owners and leaders really understand more about the people, right, that run the business and that they rely on to run I think 2020 was a great example of the need. I think up into that point, it was it was a nice to have. It wasn't really essential. And, we can treat our people the way we treat our people. We can expect them to execute or not, and not see this as a mutually beneficial relationship. But as you may or may not know, most people aren't marriage and family therapists and have very little knowledge of how to engage people and resolve conflict and engage and inspire and mobilize people without clinical training. So I do bring those tools with me and help people work better together, basically in a professional setting. So while it can be therapeutic, it's not therapy. So good news is
therapeutic. Yeah. And I'm thinking of you talking specifically about how you help businesses and leaders execute on strategy is so huge from a people perspective, which I think, is so fantastic because, the work that we're in, and we're definitely passionate about business relationships. And I think it's really, and maybe people don't see it this way. I think it's easy to come up with strategy because there's certain things that influence that. Your budget, your vision, your mission, your values, all those things kind of stand up to support a strategy. And it's execution of that strategy that usually fails. It's, it's like who's accountable for something, who's responsible for this, and who has visibility into this and insight into this. And, a lot of throwing the ball over the fence and a lot of, pointing at different people. And so I love that when you said that, kind of explained it in that way, that really resonates for me because I think that's such a need in business today, is this idea that, okay, we know what we need to do. We just don't know how to get there and how to get there in the best way. And so that's so awesome that you do that. I love that. Next question for you is, in the work that you do, and the leaders that you work with and the businesses that you work with, it's a very broad thing, a broad brushstroke to say it's relationships and people are people and we're humans and we bring all of that to work. Absolutely. What would you say, in your expert opinion, is missing in terms of the way people show up at work and need to work with each other? What skill, kind of in the power skills or soft skills world, do you think is missing?
I think the one big thing that we see on a consistent basis, and this is really industry agnostic, right, or business size agnostic, is that the way we do things, right, the way people do things when they're striving is very different person to person. Only 3 to 5% of the population share the exact same approach to solving a problem or tackling a project or getting things done. And one of the biggest areas of workplace conflict, which is it's a broad term, we'd say in about 85% of the situations where there's workplace conflict, it's actually due to the way just people instinctively do things differently. And I think because we get faced with conflict and our brain goes, what was that? What was that? Like, why is that happening? And especially under pressure and stress of a workplace situation, our go-to story we tell ourselves about the other person is they're a jerk. Right? Or, they're kind of a non-complimentary explanation or story we tell ourselves about why a person behaves that way. We don't always assume good intent. It's easier to do when the pressure's off, but I don't know about these days. The gas pedal's always mashed to the floor in a workplace setting. So I think that's probably one of the biggest and most easily addressed downfalls, I think, of human beings in the workplace today, is not assuming good intent and assuming, well, that person's just being a jerk. That we get very, not necessarily paranoid, but overly defensive, when in fact it could be that person, 15% of the time that person is a jerk, but the other 85% of the time is that we just have instinctively different strengths and ways of approaching a problem, and so we just need to figure out how to work better together given those, and be able to bring those strengths to the table instead of making this negative meaning and telling us this not constructive or destructive story about the other person. And then we start seeing that more and more, right? And then that story builds and builds based on that person's behavior. So,
oh my gosh,
long answer to a really simple question.
No, it's not a simple question. Yeah. It's not a simple question. And I love how you said that. And actually was going to just say, we often talk about in our business that, you can still be authentic and show up for other people, meeting them as they need you to be in that environment. Bruce is super technical. I'm not. And he loves a whiteboard and he loves to go and draw. And
there's one right
behind the screen. And I'm a very visual person. So once that's up there, I'm like, ooh, I get this. I can understand this. Putting it together, though, is not my bag. And so how do we assume positive intent and come together and, show up for each other in the best way to get the thing done?
And I've never heard the statistic that 3 to 5% of the population solves the problem in the same way that you did.
Yeah.
That explains so much.
That's like a huge thing. I feel like actually we got a big old gold nugget with that. That's knowing that is such a huge win.
And it also explains that my way is the right way, right? Because I know the way it works. Or,
so true.
That's fascinating to me. I wanted to go back, and I'm going to ask Gail. She doesn't know I'm going to ask her this. But comment about you want to assume positive intent, and you never know what somebody's going through, right? You expect people to bring their whole selves to work. They sometimes do, they sometimes don't, and things come out in ways that you don't expect. Tell the story about a very short story about us going to the airport when we sat down at the airport.
Yeah. So great example. So we weren't at work. We were on our way to a work experience. We stopped in to have lunch, and there was only room at the bar to sit next to this other woman. It was packed. So she had to move her things for us to sit down. I said, hey, is it okay if we sit here? These are the only 2 seats. And she was very put out and very upset and made a big deal about having to move her things, which immediately I said in my mind, oh, this woman is I was not happy about it.
Yeah, there were other choice words than not a nice person.
It was like all the star, exclamation point, all the things. And so she moved it and we sat down and I said, I hope everything's okay. And, I'm really sorry to kind of, and there was another open seat on the other side of her. And she gave me some other kind of crabby thing. And Bruce was on the phone and I had a choice. At that moment. I could re-engage with her and try again. I could be kind of like flip that negative energy back to her, which I definitely didn't want to do, or let it affect me. And so I engaged with her one more time. I said, thank you so much for making space for us. And then she just opened the door and she's on her way to see her mother who was dying in the hospital. And so of course she's stressed out. So, once we got through that, it was just like a great heartfelt conversation. And there's just a lot of people that wouldn't do that. So
yeah.
Anyway,
and I think you asked what's missing in the workplace. What's an essential skill? You use the word soft skill. I'm going to gently, kindly, and accurately replace that with an essential skill because that's what we need today, right? Yeah. And that's empathy.
Yep.
And I think a lot of times people say, "Well, we don't have time for that." Well, you have to make time for that.
Yeah.
Right. If you're not going to expect to get someone's cooperation or engagement or trust if you show up in a way that's not empathetic. Now, I'm not saying you have to 100% be Gandhi, right, all the time. But, if you could do that more often than not, I think we would be a lot farther along.
100%. That is definitely something we are passionate about. And my journey that I'm on to become a better person includes empathy and empathy training. And we say power skills instead of soft skills. I say soft because a lot of people know what that means. I like essential, though, because it is essential and they are powerful.
So here's a question for you that you've inspired me to ask. And I will try to do it in a way that makes you not call out a specific client, but what are some of the worst things that you've seen in your clients, kind of the dysfunction that you've seen with your clients that you've been called in and kind of had to work through mechanisms to fix?
This happens a lot.
I saw a little giggle.
Yeah, you're like, oh boy.
Oh, she's like, let me count the ways. Let me count the ways.
So oftentimes I get called in by the CEO initially, and then I work with the whole entire team. So I work with the system. I don't work with people in isolation. So, the CEO brings me in, I think, because he believes I can help him or her change the minds of the team, engage the team, motivate the team to, execute on strategy, for example. However, it happens pretty quickly that when the CEO gets information that she or he does not want from me, I oftentimes kind of like I walk, I ride the fence or walk the tightrope, if you will, around giving that person information that they may or may not want to hear, that may or may not be in alignment with what they believe about themselves or how they're showing up. So that tends to be an interesting situation because it's always like, oh, am I going to get fired after this? I may get fired at this conversation, but I have to. You hired me to be open and honest. It kind of reminds me of the movie. Oh gosh, help me remember the movie with Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise, where Tom Cruise is an attorney and Jack Nicholson is this older, seasoned.
A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men.
You can't handle the truth.
You want the truth? You can't
handle the truth.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Like that. I'm oftentimes in that situation, right? Where I guess we get to see if that person's coachable, open-minded or closed-minded, right?
Yeah.
In that's where we end up at a juncture in a relationship.
And have you had people fire you at that point? Like, you know what? I disagree with you. Get out of here. Have they done that?
I have had one client.
Wow.
And it was an organizational client. It was an association, actually. I try to vet my potential clients very carefully. Oftentimes I can see pitfalls, landmines, and situations where, I can work through, or I know that it's too toxic. It is immovable object. It's not something I'm going to affect change in. And so there was one client where we proceeded, did my discovery, shared my information with them. I guess I should have seen some of the red flags, didn't until we were kind of immersed in the training with the entire company. And whoa, bombs just start going off. And I know you guys probably know it too. You can kind of viscerally feel like, ooh, something's not going well. Well, that ended up deteriorating. And we had a mutual agreement to fire each other. Let's put it that way. But there were attorneys involved. Mine.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
As the business owner, you absolutely have to have a process and a here's how we do things. Here's my process. You have to protect yourself, obviously, and you have to really do due diligence to make sure that the client that that you're hiring or that's hiring you is coachable, is they're open to change. Otherwise, it feels like being in a really toxic relationship, and nobody needs that or wants that or should endure that. So I think being able to assess your clients and making sure they're really a good fit. And sometimes they're not a good fit. Sometimes you get to a point in the relationship where you realize you have to tap out and go, for these reasons, this is no longer a good fit.
Yeah.
So I think I've fired more clients than have been fired by clients. But you want to have success early, and you want to be able to be successful. So I guess I'm really picky.
Yeah,
that's good.
That's good that you are. It's good that you are. I mean, I'm a human being with an ego, and when I hear that I've not kind of stood up my end of the bargain or I've behaved in a bad way, it's difficult to hear. It's especially if you are a leader of an entire organization, there's a sense of pride and massive ego that goes with it, and it's difficult to keep that in check as a good, courageous and vulnerable leader.
You'll take ownership of that though too, and say if it's something that I can change, then I'm happy to do that. And that's a conversation I have with my clients often. I get feed forward, right? What would you like me to stop doing? What could I have done differently? Because they're never going to, if you say, how did I suck? They're not going to tell you that. But you can ask it in a way that you can then begin to adjust course. And we continue on, and that's part of kind of the learning and growing we each get to do in this relationship, in this professional relationship, right? That betters everybody. It betters me to serve my clients better in the moment, and it serves them to be able to have the conversation, a difficult or fierce conversation with somebody else, and get through it and feel like it's constructive and there's a positive outcome. It's just an example of how we practice that. Yeah. Right. So I give my clients an opportunity and hopefully model for my clients how to resolve conflict or differences of opinion, right, in a workplace setting. And there's a lot of, we learn by modeling. And so I get to, not that I'm perfect at it by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm absolutely willing to go first and kind of make it's awkward and it's uncomfortable, but hey, who doesn't feel awkward and uncomfortable with those conversations?
Yeah, somebody's got to jump in the water.
Yes.
Nobody's died, nobody cried. We all survived it, and we're going to learn from it and move forward. So I get fortunate enough to be the conduit in that situation. And it does take courage and to be able to bring that up and say, how could I be better? How can I, what didn't go as well as we'd like to? How could I, not making it about me, but making it about the purpose of our relationship together, right? And what we're trying to get done, and right, so that another, I guess, essential skill or power skill to be able to lean into the discomfort, right, of not feeling like we're getting our needs met in the relationship.
It's so important. So when you think about, because you're in a leadership role, you're a leader, and you've had a wonderful career up to this point, and you've met a lot of really interesting people. You've worked with a lot of different businesses. What would you say is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given? Something that has stuck with you, that is kind of foremost, front of mind, and has been helpful for you in your career.
You're gonna think this is funny. I think
I can't wait.
I don't know.
Oh, how much time do you have? No, I'm trying to. So I have my own ideas about how I believe things can be, And I've been called a lot of things, overly optimistic or kind of pie in the sky or unrealistic. I mean, I've kind of heard those terms. But so here was this, it was advice I pushed against. So early on in my career, before when I had the concept of actually even using skills that I learned as a therapist in the workplace setting. Now, mind you, this was before we even talked about human beings and feelings, or we don't really talk about feelings in the workplace, but caring in the workplace and how we show up in leadership. This is way before that. I feel like I'm 100 and this was 100 years. It feels like 100 years ago. But so my boss at the time was a clinical psychologist, and he ran a very successful private practice as well as a nonprofit. And a business partner of his, who was also a psychologist, and they worked actually with the sheriff's department, LA County Sheriffs was one of their bigger clients, right? And so they would kind of bring some of those clinical skills into the workplace. And so I thought, well, I have this great idea. I would love to work with business owners, CEOs, to kind of help them be nice or be better, play nice, or right, because CEOs they're in a position of influence, right? The authentic influence that creates value. That's the function of being a leader. It's a responsibility of being a leader. And I think I can make a difference. And so the advice they gave me was, okay, so Christina, when you start your business, and of course, I don't know how to say this without sounding not politically correct, but they were old white guys, to be honest with you. So there we go. And this was in the mid 90s, so they were right. And I was stupid. So that was kind of the dynamic, the relationship. I should, little pat on the head, Christina, you don't know any better, but here we're going to give you some good advice. And that advice was, when I start approaching business owners or organizations, don't tell them I'm a therapist. Do that. They said, like, don't do that because, they'll like run for the hills, right? Or they won't hear what's important about that. They'll feel threatened about that. Like, well, I'm not a mind reader. It's not like I'm a psychic or a mind reader. It's like, I just know things about people that can help them. And so that was the advice that they gave me. So I did follow that advice because, I was a good rule follower at the time. And so I was trying to break into business by talking about something in a way that I couldn't talk. I had my hands tied behind my back, right? How am I an expert? What do I know about this? Right. I can't tell you. Like, basically, so after about 5 years, I'm like, I feel like I'm beating my head against a wall. And I also had my clients tell me, when I asked them, like, help me understand why you hired me to come in and help you in your business versus, somebody else down the street. And they said, well, because you have this background as a therapist. And I'm like, you mean for like 5 years I've been not telling people I do that and not talking about it because I was embarrassed by it, or I was given really bad advice from two old white guys that didn't know shit. Excuse me. Yep. Edit that. Don't edit that. I don't care about business. Yeah. Anyway, so that was the bad advice I was given that I followed for a period of time. And then my oppositional defiant disorder came out, and I just said, I'm just going to do things in a way that I feel is authentic and real. Yeah. And I'm not going to hide who I am or what I believe. Yep. And I'm also not going to be a bull in a china shop about it either. So long story short.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I love that story. Yeah, it was kind of cut through the back door. We can relate to that. Yes. We had the same thing.
Yeah, we were told never to mention the word improv. Ever.
And we didn't. And then finally we were like, what? The people that want to work with us are going to want to work with us because of that. And that has absolutely transformed our business. Yes. So last question.
Go ahead.
Yeah. What is making you happy right now? What is inspiring you? And we don't have tons of time left. So just first thing that comes to mind, what's making you happy right now?
My granddaughter.
Oh, I love that.
How old is she?
Just having she's just 14 months.
Oh.
But yeah, she is a spitfire, man. Her parents have a handful. No, I think just luckily what inspires me right now is that because I'm a business owner, I have the time freedom to be able to enjoy time with my granddaughter and to enjoy love. I compete and rein cow horse. So it's It's a fun sport, gets adrenaline up, and I do travel as a result of that. So I think I love having the time freedom that being a business owner affords me.
Love that.
Christina Haxton.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on with us today.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
And sharing everything. The business owners and leaders out there are so lucky to have you.
Yes, indeed.
And we look forward to maybe chatting in the future.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been really fun.
All right. Bye. Take care.